Hello, I hope you're doing well. So today we're going to look at what if you could break your own stress cycle without changing many parts of your life. So many people talk about the level of stress that's in their life day to day. And we know that stress creates a lot of hardship for us, mentally, emotionally, and physically. And knowing that and continuing to allow ourselves to feel this level of stress day to day to day is an interesting idea to have a closer look at. So I posted on my Facebook page this morning, or it might have been last night. And please, if you're interested, go and find my Facebook group, Pure Power Coaching, and join us there, because I'm always trying to share information that may be helpful to you in your own journey of self-development. So I posted a quote from a doctor, a Canadian doctor at that, who's becoming quite well known in the healing community, Dr. Gabor Maté. And his entire practice and the books that he's written and the work that he does revolves around addiction, and his understanding through his own research and his personal experiences with clients and patients over the years, that addictive behaviors always are born from traumatic experiences. And he attests to that across the board. He doesn't waver from that. And therefore, addiction isn't something that people choose. Addiction comes as a result of traumatic life experiences. And what the life experience is very individual. In fact, sometimes that experience may seem relatively minor to some, but it actually impacted the person deeply, either because that was just the makeup of their own personality, the age that they were at when they encountered the stress and the traumatic event. It doesn't really matter. I went to see him actually in person, and I remember someone, and I'm sure it happens quite often when he's speaking, people start to challenge the idea because perhaps they know someone or they themselves have faced some addictive behavior, but they can't identify any traumatic experience in their life. And I remember this one lady stood up and said, I have not experienced this, especially in childhood. I had a great childhood. I had great parents. I didn't suffer any sort of trauma. And he looked at her and he said, were you spanked? Now, again, I don't want to get into all the debates about these things. But interestingly enough, she had been. And whether it's the physical, pain of being spanked, but more likely the psychological damage that it can do to a child in terms of destroying self-esteem, feeling that you've failed, that you're not good enough, all of those things as a result of negative physical actions towards a child can produce that subconscious, it eventually becomes quite subconscious, feeling of unworthiness and not good enough. So going back to the stress, yesterday the quote that I posted from Dr. Maté was discussing the idea that people who have grown up in dysfunction and a lot of trauma. So again, and for my own personal experience, I did. And it comes as a result often of addiction in the family, mental health issues in the family, a lot of turmoil and chaos within your family dynamic at home growing up. And of course, for me, there's no doubt that there was a lot of trauma that came as a result of that. But what he was pointing out in terms of stress and the potential stress that we carry forward in our lives as a result of that is that the body actually becomes addicted to producing cortisol and adrenaline, which are those chemicals that are produced when we're in fight or flight mode, because we're so often feeling that way in a household where you don't feel safe, you don't feel heard, you don't feel loved, maybe all three. So this heightened adrenaline and cortisol production in the body that gives you this fight or flight and this surge of energy, even though it's not helpful or healthy energy, it actually gives you this rush of energy, and you're often living in it. And your body then starts to look for it, almost crave it as you go forward in life. And this really resonated with me because I realized many, many years later, as I entered into my own journey of recovery, that I was in fact addicted to chaos. It's what I knew. And subconsciously, it was what I kept recreating in my adult life. Even though I'd have these moments where I would seek out clarity and calm, I would always end up back creating, myself creating, these chaotic circumstances. And one example of that is when I got married the first time. And a lot of my friends were getting married at that time. I was in my late 20s. I had a fantastic job as a travel editor. I was traveling the world. I was seeing the most amazing things. I knew how fortunate I was to be in the position that I was in and doing the things that I was doing. I was very happy with my life. But of course, because I had low self-esteem, and no matter how successful I appeared in the outside world, I was always comparing myself, even to my very best friends. And at that point, they were getting married. And I started to notice some behaviors of mine that were not helpful to me in my day-to-day life. I was drinking a lot, and the outcomes of drinking a lot and my choices and so on were not the best, shall we say. And it started to scare me a little bit, especially because sometimes this was happening when I was traveling and when I was working. And I put myself in some precarious situations sometimes and was pulling myself out and feeling quite stressed about it. So my thought was, perhaps it's time for me to settle down. And I met this wonderful man, and we fell in love, and we got married. And the minute all of that, and you know, that running around and rushing around to get everything organized for the wedding, and the, again, the high level of energy that it required, juggling things and figuring things out. I always loved that. I realized today that I sort of thrived on it. And anytime there was an extreme sense of calm, I kind of thought my life must be getting boring and that I wasn't maximizing everything that was available to me in my life. So I was clearly addicted to that sort of fight or flight feeling and those chemicals in my body. And so I was always, rushing and doing. And creating some stress that very likely I didn't need to be encountering, but I realized today that I was just attached to those feelings. So fast forward, we got married. I immediately thought, what now? So now it was, we've got to get a house. We've got to get it now. And, I really pushed and maneuvered and tried to figure out ways in which we could do that. And this wonderful man that I was married to, did everything he could in order to fulfill that. And we got our little house. And then the minute we got the house, I had to renovate, paint, renovate. Almost from the day I moved in, that place wasn't enough. I had to have more. I had to do more. I had to be running around. all the time at that high level of energy. And, eventually that house got renovated. And then I was really bored. And I remember the conversation coming up about what about having kids now? It's like, are you kidding me? Like I got a life to lead here. I've got this job. I've got things to do, places to go. Like I'm not ready to settle down. And eventually that feeling for me of needing chaos, even though I thought it was excitement and activity and new things happening all the time, caused me to leave that marriage. A marriage that really there was nothing wrong with that marriage. There was something wrong with me. There was nothing wrong with the marriage. And I set out on a path of I was talking to my daughter yesterday. I said, it's like, when you've got the explosives and you've got that handle and you press it down like that. And what I did was I took my life as it was and I took that and I pressed it down and I blew it up as big as you can possibly imagine in every direction possible. And I set out on an entirely new life's journey. And again, today I realized that was my addictive behavior to just creating chaos for the sake of it being part of my life. So I'd like you to think about that. When I entered my own journey of recovery from alcohol and drugs and my emotional craziness and my addiction to chaos, there were a lot of things that I had to reconsider. And one of them was the idea that having a calmer life and making choices around my thinking so that I didn't always have to overblow things that were happening in my life, that I could look at them more as these things are manageable rather than waking up and going, I got to do this and this and this and this, and everything's like crazy. I'm asking you to look at your day-to-day circumstances, and if you see yourself in a pattern of getting yourself worked up every day about the doing. And it takes some time and practice and effort. But one thing that I started to do is I'd write out the things that needed to be done, and then I'd identify, of say the 10, the 3 that either had to be done or that were my preferences to get accomplished in that day. And I started to organize my to-do list a lot more completely. And the minute I did that, my levels of anxiety and stress started to reduce. And it's not always a comfortable feeling, by the way. If you're addicted to the stress hormones, then to let them go and to develop an addiction to some peaceful options, to some calm in your life, to doing nothing rather than doing something, that is extremely difficult. That's also why people like myself have a really tough time meditating. Because you're such a doer and you're such a I gotta do, I'm doing, that the idea of sitting still, even initially for 5 or 10 minutes, is really difficult. And it's understandable. But if you want to shift yourself out of the stress mentality, because I think a lot of stress is a mental affliction that we put on ourselves. And you can break these habits if you want to. If you're tired of feeling this sense of exhaustion every day from being at this high stress level. You can live your life still generally the way you're living it, but approaching it in different ways and finding those little tiny things that can switch your habits and behaviors can completely change your perception of what's going on in your life. And, I thought the idea of a peaceful, calm life was nothing but boring. And today I find that if you said to me, what is your greatest desire in your life? I would say first and foremost, a sense of calm and peace internally and in my mind. Because from there, I can take on just about anything. But if I'm not there, I'm sort of frozen. and can't get things done and just start going down that black hole of thinking negatively and worrisome thoughts, and I start to build up the stress and I start to bring back those stress hormones into my sphere. The good news is today I know when I'm doing it and I'm not interested in being that person anymore. So I'm able to pull myself back and I'm able to do the things that I need to do in order to pull my mind out of that mind stream and into the calm, peaceful mind stream. So I'd like you to think about that. Pay attention to your thoughts. Pay attention to your stress levels. Maybe do the to-do list and start identifying the 2 or 3 things that must be done, and the others start moving into other days of the week. That's a real simple practice. 5 or 10 minutes of meditation. Do a guided meditation. You'll find them all over the place on YouTube and everywhere else for free. You can listen to someone. They can be talking to you. They can be guiding you. You don't have to just sit and empty your brain, because that's almost impossible for anybody, but especially people who are at high stress levels. And that's my message for today. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you'd like to subscribe to the channel, please press the heart on the heart, and perhaps share a video if you find it useful and that you think someone else would find it useful. And I will see you again.